Single dad. Mike Bennett finds a lost wallet on a park bench. Inside is a name that unlocks a world of wealth, secrets, and a woman who's been hiding from everything but the truth. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The park was quiet that day, the kind of stillness that only came in the lull between school drop-offs and afternoon errands. Mike Bennett sat on the worn bench beneath the old maple tree, its leaves just beginning to brown at the edges. He chewed slowly through the last bite of his peanut butter sandwich, the kind Anna had helped him make that morning, with way too much jelly and a crooked fold in the bread. He didn't mind. Those lunches were as close to gourmet as it got lately. A light breeze rustled the grass, and something caught his eye on the opposite side of the bench. A wallet, slim and black, resting neatly against the wood like it had been placed there on purpose. He glanced around. No one in sight, just a squirrel darting across the path, and a jogger in the distance, earbuds in, oblivious. He picked it up carefully, almost like it might explode. The leather was smooth, expensive feeling, the kind of wallet that didn't belong in a neighborhood where most folks carried cracked phone cases and wore duct-taped boots through the winter. It wasn't until he opened it that he realized how strange it really was. No credit cards, no ID, no driver's license, just a small stack of crisp $100 bills and a folded piece of stationery that smelled faintly like lavender. He unfolded it. Written in looping feminine handwriting was a name, Isla. Below it, 3 addresses, each one a mystery. Mike let out a low whistle and looked around again, half expecting a hidden camera or someone to pop out from behind a tree shouting, "Gotcha!" But nothing happened. Just the wind, the rustle of branches, and the faint squeal of the park swings turning in the breeze. He stared at the wallet a moment longer, then tucked it into his coat pocket. He didn't know who Isla was. He didn't know if this was a test, a mistake, or something else entirely. But what he did know, what he always knew, was that doing the right thing was rarely convenient and always worth it. He stood brushing crumbs from his jeans and made his way back toward the garage. The lunch break was over. The story was just beginning. Back at the garage, the hum of a struggling engine filled the air, mixing with the scent of oil and rust that clung to every corner of the small space. Mike tucked the wallet onto his workbench beside a half-used roll of duct tape and an open socket wrench set. He meant to get back to the busted Subaru parked in Bay 3, but his eyes kept drifting to the wallet like it had a voice of its own. Wiping his hands on a rag, he finally gave in and opened it again, slower this time, like the thing might reveal more if he handled it with care. No license, no credit cards, no business cards or grocery receipts, just the same crisp bills, too many to ignore, not quite enough to assume anything criminal, and the single folded slip of stationery, heavy and smooth, like it came from one of those fancy sets people gave as wedding gifts but never used. He opened it fully, smoothing the creases with calloused fingers. The name was still there. Isla, nothing else. No last name, no title or flourish. Just 4 letters written in ink that had bled ever so slightly into the paper. Beneath it were 3 handwritten addresses. One local, a bookstore Mike vaguely remembered from the next town over. Another from a place upstate. And the third, Manhattan. A building he didn't recognize, but the name sounded expensive, the kind of place with a doorman and heated sidewalks. He frowned. This didn't feel like a mistake anymore. People didn't carry cash like this. They didn't carry nothing but cash and a list of addresses. And they definitely didn't leave something that personal behind unless they wanted it found. The thought unsettled him. He considered calling the police, but what would he say? "Hi, I found a wallet with money and no ID, and I think the owner might be playing some kind of mystery game?" That would go over great. Instead, he reached for his phone and took a picture of the addresses. If this was the start of something strange, he wanted a trail. Then he did what he always did when life got weird. He went back to work. But as he crouched under the Subaru, tightening bolts and checking hoses, the name Isla kept echoing in his mind, soft and insistent, like a whisper he couldn't quite place. The sun was beginning its slow descent by the time Mike got home, casting long shadows across the modest living room where Anna and Jake were sprawled on the floor with coloring books. Dinner simmered on the stove, boxed macaroni with hot dogs sliced in, the kind of meal Mike could whip up one-handed while juggling bills with the other. But his thoughts weren't on dinner, they were on the wallet. It had sat in his coat pocket all day, like a weight pressing against his side. After putting the kids to bed, he finally sat at the kitchen table, wallet open in front of him, the addresses and the name already burned into memory. That's when he noticed something he hadn't seen before. On the back of the folded dry cleaning receipt, barely legible beneath a coffee stain, was a phone number. No label, no name. Just digits scrawled in quick, looping handwriting. Mike stared at it, phone in hand, thumb hovering over the dial button. He hesitated. Something about it felt personal. Too personal. But curiosity had teeth, and this one had been gnawing at him all day. He exhaled slowly, then tapped the screen. It rang once, twice. On the third ring, someone answered. "Hello?" The voice was female, low, composed, polished but tired. Mike cleared his throat. Hi, sorry to bother you. I found something and I think it might belong to you, or someone you know." A pause. "Who is this?" "My name's Mike Bennett. I found a wallet in the park today. No ID, just some money, a name, Isla, and a list of addresses. This number was written on a receipt inside." The line went quiet. So quiet, Mike wondered if she'd hung up. Then she spoke. "Where are you calling from?" "Willow Creek," he said cautiously. "Just outside Redfield." Another pause, then, "Can we meet?" Mike blinked. Sure, I guess. Where?" "There's a cafe in Redfield, Bell and Finch. Tomorrow at noon?" "All right," he said, more out of reflex than certainty. "Bring the wallet," she added. "And, thank you." The line went dead. Mike stared at his phone for a long moment, heart thudding a little louder than before. Something about that voice, measured but distant, made him feel like he'd just stepped into someone else's story. And now he couldn't back out. Bell and Finch was the kind of cafe that tried hard not to look like it was trying. Chalkboard menus, mason jar glasses, and overpriced muffins that looked prettier than they tasted. Mike felt out of place the moment he walked in. His worn work boots scuffed the polished floors, and the flannel shirt he'd thrown on last minute felt like camouflage in the sea of business casual. He scanned the room, wallet in his jacket pocket, still unsure why he'd agreed to this. That voice on the phone had stayed with him, smooth, measured, but carrying something else underneath, something bruised. He spotted her near the back, tucked into a corner booth with her back to the wall. A pale gray coat draped over the seat beside her, a cup of untouched tea in front of her. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple twist, and even without makeup or flash, she looked like she didn't belong here, like she was too used to silence, too practiced at disappearing into it. Isa Monroe. She looked up as he approached, and for a moment neither of them said a word, just silence, just recognition. "Mike?" she asked, standing slowly. He nodded. "Yeah, that's me." Her hand extended, not tentative, not overly friendly, just polite. "Thank you for coming." He shook it briefly, then slid into the booth across from her. Up close, he noticed how tightly she held herself, like even sitting still required effort. There were shadows under her eyes, the kind you didn't get from lack of sleep, but from too many years keeping secrets. He pulled the wallet from his coat and set it gently on the table. "I figured you'd want it back." She stared at it for a long moment, as if it might vanish. Then she reached for it, slipping it into her bag without even checking the contents. "I didn't expect anyone to actually call," she admitted, almost sheepishly. "I didn't expect a wallet with no ID and 3 mystery addresses," he said, managing a small smile. Her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "Fair enough?" For a moment they sat in a comfortable kind of quiet, the kind born from mutual curiosity and something unspoken humming beneath the surface. Then Isla leaned forward slightly, voice quieter now. "You didn't have to return it. Most wouldn't have." Mike met her gaze evenly. "Maybe, but I've got 2 kids who are always watching. I try to make sure they see the right kind of choices." And, for the first time, Isla smiled. Not the rehearsed kind, but one with something behind it. "Then they're lucky to have you." The meeting at the cafe ended without fanfare. No dramatic reveals, no sudden promises, just a polite thank you, a soft handshake, and Isla slipping out the door with that same quiet grace she'd carried in with her. Mike figured that would be it. Just a strange little detour in his otherwise predictable life. But the next morning, everything shifted. It started with a car, not just any car. Something sleek and foreign that hummed rather than roared, parked at the curb in front of the garage. Midnight black with chrome accents so clean they could reflect your conscience. Mike didn't even recognize the logo. It wasn't on the market. It probably wasn't even meant for markets like his town. From the driver's side stepped a man in a tailored suit and an expression that said he hadn't smiled since 2008. He handed Mike a small envelope and left without a word. Inside the envelope was a simple cream-colored card. "For your time, Isla." No phone number, no return address, just a name. Folded inside the card was a check. Mike blinked, then blinked again. $20,000. He stood there for a solid minute, staring at the thing like it might catch fire. He could pay off his debts, fix the truck, put something away for Anna and Jake, maybe even breathe a little. But all he felt was cold. Unearned money had a weight all its own. He folded the check carefully and tucked it back inside the envelope. Later that evening, curiosity got the better of him. He searched her name. Not Isa Monroe, the mystery woman, but Isa Monroe, the Monroe Group heiress. Dozens of articles came up. Billionaire legacy, tech and real estate holdings across 3 continents, interviews where she smiled just enough to look human, and gossip columns where she vanished just long enough to seem haunted. Private estates, boardrooms, lawsuits and philanthropy, and whispers of something broken in the foundation of her empire. He sat back in his chair, staring at the screen. Isa Monroe hadn't just walked away from wealth. She'd run from it, hard and fast and far, and now she was here in his orbit. And for the life of him, Mike couldn't figure out why. The invitation came in a text, short, polite, and just formal enough to feel like it had been edited 3 times before she hit send. "Would it be all right if I treated your children to ice cream, as a thank you for you and for them?" Mike stared at it for a long minute. Isla hadn't reached out since the cafe, not after the envelope, not after the car. He still had the check, still hadn't decided what to do with it. But this was different. He showed the message to Anna that evening, her legs swinging off the kitchen stool as she colored in a half-finished unicorn. "Do we know her?" Anna asked, head tilting. "She's the lady whose wallet I found," Mike said. "She wants to say thanks." Jake perked up from the floor, where he was lining up his toy cars in a perfect row. "Is she bringing sprinkles?" Mike laughed. "I'll ask." By Saturday afternoon, they were seated at a booth in Sweet Spoon Creamery, one of the few places in town that hadn't changed in 20 years. Isla arrived precisely at 2. She wore jeans and a navy sweater, hair tucked behind her ears, a small purse slung over one shoulder like she was trying not to look out of place and failing in the gentlest way. Anna watched her with open curiosity. Jake just wanted a waffle cone. Isla knelt beside their table, meeting their eyes on their level, a soft smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "You must be Anna," she said, then nodded to Jake. "And you're Jake." Jake held up 3 fingers. "I'm 5. Isla's smile widened. "Even better." They ordered chocolate for Jake, strawberry for Anna, vanilla for Isla, though she barely touched hers. Instead, she listened, really listened, as Anna talked about her school's art contest and Jake proudly explained the rules of his imaginary monster truck race. Mike watched, a little stunned. There was no phone in Isla's hand, no distracted glances or fake interest. She was present, honest. And when she laughed at one of Anna's jokes, it wasn't the polite kind. It was real. Afterward, as they wiped sticky fingers and gathered napkins, Anna leaned over to whisper, "I like her, Dad." Mike didn't say much in return, but he nodded. Because he liked her too. More than he probably should. Rent had been hanging over Mike's head like a storm cloud all month. He was 2 weeks past due, juggling overtime shifts at the garage and whispering quiet reassurances to himself every time the kids fell asleep. "We'll make it. We always do." But hope stretched thin when the fridge hummed louder than usual and the radiator coughed like it needed its own mechanic. By Tuesday, a pink notice slid under the door. Final warning. He stared at it longer than he should have, still in his boots, jacket half-zipped. The weight in his chest felt familiar, too familiar. So when he stopped by the property office the next morning, bracing himself for a hard conversation, he was ready for the usual, half promises, partial payments, maybe an extension if the clerk felt generous. Instead, the woman at the front desk looked up with a sunny smile. "Taken care of," she said. Mike blinked. "What?" She tapped a few keys. "Payment went through this morning. Full balance, plus 2 months ahead." He shook his head slowly. "No, that's... There must be a mistake. I didn't pay that." "No mistake." She lowered her voice. "It was handled by wire. Anonymous source. Came through one of those private trust accounts." Mike's heart dropped. He didn't need a name to know where that money came from. That afternoon, he stood at the edge of the park near the bench where he'd first found the wallet. The crisp October wind tugged at his sleeves as he stared out across the empty path. Isla wasn't there, but he didn't expect her to be, not this time. Later, when his phone buzzed, he didn't bother pretending he hadn't seen the message. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to overstep. You didn't ask for help, but sometimes it's okay to accept it. Just think of it as another thank you." He stared at the screen for a long time, then he typed one word. "Why?" Her reply came fast. "Because people like you don't ask, and people like me rarely give for the right reasons. I'm trying to change that." Mike didn't know what unsettled him more, that she paid the rent or that she somehow knew exactly who he was. They met again at the park, same bench, same time, but nothing about the air between them felt familiar anymore. Mike arrived first, hands shoved deep into the pockets of his work jacket, jaw set. Isla appeared moments later, calm as ever, though her eyes flickered with unease as she approached. She sat beside him without a word, but the silence was heavy, the kind that threatened to crack with the smallest breath. "You paid my rent," Mike said flatly, staring straight ahead. Isla exhaled softly. "I did?" "Why?" His voice was tighter now, controlled. "You think I can't take care of my own kids?" "That's not what I think." She looked at him, expression unreadable. "I saw a problem, I helped." Mike turned to face her. "Yeah? And what gave you the right to decide I needed saving?" "I didn't save you, Mike," she said quietly. "I thanked you. There's a difference." He stood up, running a hand through his hair. "You don't get it. You can walk in here, hand out checks, call it kindness. But to me, that's charity. And I don't want it." She stayed seated, her voice measured. "Do you think that makes you stronger, turning down help just because it came with a name you don't trust?" Mike's fists clenched, but he didn't speak. "I didn't send money to shame you," she said, finally rising to meet his eye. "You're not a project. You're a good man, a good father, who helped a stranger without expecting a thing in return. That's rare. And I wanted to do something decent in return. That's it." Mike stared at her, frustration and something else swirling behind his eyes. "You could have just said thank you." "I did," she replied. "But thank yous fade. Rent notices don't. Silence again, a different kind. Finally, Mike sighed. I don't want my kids growing up thinking money solves everything. Isla softened. Neither do I. That's why I left everything behind. Mike looked at her, and for the first time he saw it. The loneliness behind the calm, the cost of privilege no one ever talks about. Next time, he said, voice lower now, ask. She nodded. Deal. The cafe felt different this time, less like neutral ground, more like familiar terrain, though Isla still ordered tea she wouldn't drink, and Mike still took his coffee black, steaming hot, like it was the only thing anchoring him to the moment. They sat across from each other in the same booth as before, the soft murmur of conversation and clinking dishes filling the space between sips. Mike hadn't expected her to text again, much less suggest another meeting, but she had, and something in her tone, soft, tentative, had made it impossible to say no. I owe you an explanation, she said, fingers wrapped around her cup. About everything. You don't owe me anything, Mike replied, but the curiosity in his voice betrayed him. Isla smiled faintly, eyes focused on the window instead of him. I was born into a life that looked perfect from the outside. Press releases, charity balls, magazine covers. My father owned half of the skyline in New York, and my mother made sure I knew which fork to use by age 5. Mike arched a brow. Sounds exhausting. It was, she said, but it was also expected. Being a Monroe meant playing a role. I wasn't a daughter. I was a placeholder for the next generation, groomed for press conferences and corporate meetings. They didn't care what I wanted, just how I looked doing what they told me to. Mike leaned back, folding his arms. So you walked away. Not right away, she admitted. I tried, for years, tried to fit in, to make them proud. I worked in the company, led divisions, but every decision I made had strings. I wasn't Ela. I was a pawn with nice hair and a strategic smile. She paused, voice lower now. Then my mother died, and something broke in me. I looked around at everything we had, money, power, privilege, and realized I couldn't breathe. So I left, quietly. I liquidated what I could, burned bridges, disappeared. Mike stared at her. And now you're here, in Willow Creek. She met his eyes finally, looking for something real, something small, something honest. He didn't respond right away, just nodded, slow and steady. Well, you picked the right town for that. The bench became a kind of ritual. Every Thursday just after lunch, Mike would finish up a brake job or oil change, wipe the grease from his hands, and walk the few blocks to the park. And every Thursday, Isla would already be there, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with nothing but that quiet calm she carried like armor. They never planned it, never confirmed, but somehow they both just knew to show up. At first, their conversations were simple. Weather, the kids, the odd news story, small talk that hovered safely on the surface. But as the weeks stretched on, the words deepened, slowly like water wearing down stone. Mike told her about Anna's drawings, how she turned the garage into a gallery with her rainbow stick figures and proud declarations of art show. Isla laughed at that genuinely and promised to bring colored pencils next time. She did, in every shade imaginable. He told her about Jake's night terrors, how sometimes he woke up crying for his mom, even though he barely remembered her. How Mike had learned to sit in the dark, whispering made-up stories just to help the boy fall back asleep. Isla listened, always. She never tried to fix it, never changed the subject. Just listened. Like maybe she needed those stories just as much as he needed to tell them. In return, she shared slivers of herself, her love of old movies, how she used to sneak out of fundraisers to hide in hotel kitchens and make grilled cheese with the staff, how she hadn't spoken to her father in almost 2 years, how sometimes, when it got too quiet at night, she'd play the same piano song over and over just to feel like the silence wasn't winning. Mike never asked for more than she gave, and Isla never apologized for what she held back. Their smiles came easier now, less guarded, more familiar. They still didn't touch, not even a hand on a shoulder, but the space between them didn't feel so distant anymore. And though neither said it out loud, both knew that old park bench had become something rare, a place where they could simply exist. No expectations, no masks, just real. It arrived in a crisp white envelope, the kind printed with heavy cardstock and embossed initials that screamed old money and older expectations. Isla found it slipped beneath the door of her rented cottage one rainy morning, the return address unmissable. Monroe and Calhoun, LLP, Manhattan, M.W. She didn't open it right away. For hours it sat untouched on the kitchen table, beside her cold tea and an open book she wasn't really reading. The rain tapped steadily against the windows, and still she couldn't bring herself to break the seal. But eventually, curiosity, or maybe inevitability, won. The letter was short, formal, all edges, no warmth. Ms. Monroe, your father, Charles Monroe, is requesting a private meeting regarding the current restructuring of Monroe Holdings and your remaining interests therein. He has expressed a desire to speak with you in person. Time is of the essence. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience. Regards, Henry G. Calhoun. Isla read it 3 times, her jaw tightening with each pass. There was no, "I miss you," no, "I'm sorry." Just legal jargon dressed up like sentiment. She hadn't heard from her father in over 20 months, not after the fallout, not after her abrupt exit, not after she'd walked away from the only life she'd ever known. When she left everything, the board seat, the trust fund, the penthouse view, and in return she got silence. Not disapproval, erasure. And now he wanted a meeting. She folded the letter carefully, slid it back into its envelope, and tucked it inside a drawer she rarely opened. Later that afternoon she sat on the bench at the park earlier than usual, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She didn't notice the wind, didn't notice the sun breaking through the clouds. She just stared at nothing, mind spiraling through memories she'd spent years trying to forget. When Mike arrived and sat beside her, he noticed the shift immediately. "You okay?" She didn't answer at first, just handed him the envelope. He turned it over in his hands, then glanced at her. "You gonna read it?" "I already did." "And?" She looked at him, eyes heavy. "He wants to see me, not because he misses me, because he needs something." Mike nodded slowly. "What are you gonna do?" "I don't know," she said softly. "I left that life for a reason, but some ghosts don't stay buried." He didn't push, he just stayed. And for the first time that day, she let herself lean, just slightly, toward the comfort of someone who didn't want anything from her at all. The bike was a rusted mess when Isla wheeled it into the garage, its tires flat, the chain hanging loose like a forgotten necklace. The paint, once cherry red, had faded to something closer to dusty rose, chipped and scuffed from years of neglect. She brought it in, wrapped in a blanket, like she was carrying something fragile instead of a piece of old metal. Mike looked up from under the hood of a battered Ford, wiping his hands on a rag. "What do we have here?" Isla hesitated. "It's a long story." He stepped closer, raising an eyebrow as she unwrapped it. The bike looked like it belonged in a scrapyard, but there was something in the way she placed it down, gently, with both hands, that made him pause. "It was mine," she said, "from when I was a kid. The only thing I ever rode that didn't have an engine or a chauffeur." Mike crouched next to it, turning the pedal slowly, testing the brake levers. "Looks like she's got some fight left in her." "You think it's fixable?" she asked, almost like she didn't want a hope. He gave her a small smile. "Everything's fixable, just takes time, and someone who gives a damn." That afternoon turned into evening. Mike pulled out parts he hadn't used in years, repurposed bits from forgotten boxes, and let Isla hand him tools while she sat cross-legged on the garage floor. She watched him work with quiet fascination. how his hands moved without hesitation, how he spoke to the bike like it was something worth saving. They talked while he worked. Not about her father or the letter or the past, just little things, music, movies. The way Jake always tried to wear both socks on one foot just to make Anna laugh. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the bike stood upright, wheels true, chain polished, red paint touched up with careful strokes. Isla stared at it like it was something holy. "You made it beautiful again," she whispered. Mike shrugged. It always was, just needed someone to see it. And in that quiet, oil-scented garage, Isla realized he wasn't just fixing bikes, or cars, or broken days. He was fixing her too, slowly, gently, one piece at a time. Mike didn't plan it like some grand gesture. It was just a Tuesday, and the kids wanted spaghetti again. He was stirring sauce with one hand, flipping garlic bread with the other, when he glanced at the phone and typed the message almost without thinking. "Dinner at our place? Nothing fancy? Bring an appetite." He almost regretted it after sending. It felt too personal, too domestic. But 20 minutes later, Isla replied, "I'll be there." She arrived just after 6, hair pulled into a loose braid, wearing jeans and a navy sweater that had clearly seen more comfort than couture. In her hands was a small bouquet of grocery store daisies, bright, imperfect, and utterly unnecessary. Jake ran to the door barefoot, holding a crayon in one hand and a paper crown in the other. "We're making kingdoms," he declared. Isla knelt to his level. "Well then, Your Majesty, I'm honored to be invited." Anna peeked from behind the couch, grinning. "I drew you something," she said, holding out a picture of a girl with a long braid and a sparkly purple dress. "That's you." Isla blinked, caught off guard. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice soft. "I've never had a portrait before." Dinner was loud and chaotic, and nothing like the meals Isla grew up with. No staff, no stiff linens or glass that clinked at the wrong time. Just chipped plates, overcooked noodles, and 2 kids who couldn't stop telling knock-knock jokes between bites. Mike poured wine into mismatched mugs. "It's red," he said. "That's about all I know." Isla laughed, really laughed, and something in her chest loosened. After dinner, Jake insisted she join their coloring contest. She sat cross-legged on the floor, a crayon in each hand, pretending to take it seriously, while Mike washed dishes to the hum of a radio in the background. At one point, Anna leaned over and whispered, "You're really good at staying inside the lines." Isla smiled. "I used to be good at a lot of things like that." By the end of the night, when the kids were in pajamas, and Mike offered her a second mug of wine, Isla looked around the tiny, imperfect home and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the kind that came from silence, the kind that came from belonging. The night was quiet in the way only small towns could be. No sirens, no traffic, just the low hum of wind slipping through tree branches and the faint creak of the porch swing. Mike and Isla sat side by side on the swing outside his house, 2 mismatched mugs of cooling tea between them, the porch light casting a soft halo above their heads. The kids had gone to bed hours ago. Jake had fallen asleep mid-sentence, Anna right behind him, curled up with a book she pretended not to be reading upside down. The house was silent now, but the kind that felt full, not empty. Isla hadn't said much since dinner. Her laughter had dimmed as the night deepened, and Mike knew better than to press. Sometimes quiet meant comfort. Other times it meant the storm was still gathering. After a while she spoke. "My mother died 3 years ago." Mike turned his head, waiting. "She had cancer, the kind that comes quiet and ends fast." Isla's voice was calm, but the edge of it trembled. She didn't tell anyone until it was too late, not even me. She didn't want to be fussed over, said the Monroes didn't do weakness. Mike said nothing. He just let her speak, let the porch swing creak softly beneath them. She was the only one who ever really saw me. The rest of the family treated me like an asset, a future executive, an extension of the Monroe legacy. She paused, jaw tight. "But, Mom," she remembered I loved books. She snuck me cookies at midnight. She was the only softness in a world built on marble and glass. "And when she was gone," Mike said gently, "there was nothing left but the marble." She nodded. "Exactly. And I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't pretend that money made up for the silence. Couldn't sit in boardrooms while my heart felt like it was rotting from the inside out." He looked at her, really looked, at the woman who carried her grief like it was sewn into her skin. "I left," she said, "but I didn't just leave the company. I left me. I didn't know how to be without her." Mike didn't offer words of comfort. He just reached over and covered her hand with his, steady and warm. "You're still here," he said quietly, "and you're finding your way back." And in the hush between them, Isla closed her eyes, just for a moment, and let herself believe that maybe he was right. It was supposed to be a simple afternoon, just Mike, Isla, and the kids walking through the fall festival in the town square. Hay bales, apple cider, and booths lined with hand-knitted scarves and homemade candles. Jake wore a paper cowboy hat. Anna had her face painted like a butterfly. The four of them moved like a family, even if no one had said the word out loud. Isla had let herself relax, just a little. She laughed at Mike's terrible dad jokes, helped Anna pick out a cinnamon roll bigger than her face, and didn't flinch when someone called her Mom by mistake. She didn't correct them either, but the moment shattered as quickly as it had formed. He was standing by the kettle corn stand, sunglasses pushed up into his hair, phone in hand, the kind of man who looked like he never got dirty, crisp, tailored, shiny. Isla recognized him instantly. Grant Holloway, COO of Monroe Holdings, her father's right hand, and her ex-fiancé. The blood drained from her face. He saw her at the same time. He didn't call out, just tilted his head, smiled that polished, press-ready smile, and started walking toward them. Mike noticed her freeze and instinctively stepped closer. "Isla," Grant said smoothly, stopping just short of invading her space, "didn't expect to find you in flannel country." "Didn't expect you to be following me," she replied, voice cool. "I wasn't." He glanced at Mike, then the kids. His brow lifted. "Interesting company." Mike extended a hand, but the gesture was met with a flick of Grant's eyes and no movement. Mike dropped it. He didn't need the introduction to know exactly what kind of man he was dealing with. "Nice to see you're adapting," Grant added, that smile sharpening. "This will definitely make for an interesting story." "Don't start," Isla warned. He leaned in just slightly, voice low. "You think you can disappear, but people don't just forget a Monroe, especially not when they're spotted living a Hallmark movie in small-town nowhere." And with that he turned and walked away, already tapping something into his phone. By nightfall, it started. Isla's name trending. A blurry photo of her and Mike by the cider booth. Headlines whispering about scandals, secrets, and the Monroe heiress hiding out with a mystery man and 2 children. She stared at the screen in Mike's kitchen, her phone buzzing nonstop. Mike stood beside her, arms crossed, jaw set. "So," he said, quiet but firm, "that's the past?" She nodded slowly, throat tight. "That's the part I was running from." He met her eyes steady. "Then maybe it's time we stop running." The morning started like any other. Jake jumping on the bed before sunrise, Anna requesting pancakes with chocolate chips they didn't have, and Mike shuffling to the kitchen in worn sweatpants, half awake and already late. He didn't notice anything was off until he reached for his phone and saw the unread messages. Dozens of them, missed calls, notifications from numbers he didn't recognize. The first text that caught his eye was from a buddy he hadn't talked to in a year. "Dude, you're famous? What is this?" Attached was a blurry screenshot from a gossip blog. Mike clicked the link with a growing pit in his stomach. There he was. They were, front and center, on a glitzy website he'd never heard of. A photo of him and Isla walking through the fall festival. Jake perched on his shoulders, Anna holding Isla's hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. The headline read, "Heiress in hiding, Isa Monroe, spotted with mystery man and kids in small-town romance plot twist." He scrolled further. There were speculations about Isla's disappearance, conspiracies, quotes from anonymous sources close to the Monroe family. Some praised her for choosing a simpler life. Others mocked it, called it performative, a PR stunt. And then there was him, Mike Bennett, local mechanic, widowed father. A few articles already had his full name, his garage's name, a Yelp page with one-star spam reviews. Someone had even posted a photo of his truck with a caption, "Is this Isa Monroe's new ride?" He put the phone down like it burned. The kids were eating breakfast at the table, chattering about cereal box puzzles, unaware that the world outside their little house was now watching. Mike's mind raced. He wasn't built for this. He fixed engines. He made lunch boxes. He didn't live under a spotlight. When Isa knocked on the door 30 minutes later, he was already pacing. She saw the look on his face before he said a word. "They know," he muttered, voice tight, "about everything. About me. About the kids." Isa stepped inside slowly. "I didn't mean for this to happen." He met her eyes, hurt, guarded. "I know, but meaning doesn't change the fact that it did." And for the first time since they met, the space between them felt unfamiliar. The reporters came in waves. At first it was just a couple of unfamiliar cars parked too long across from the garage. Mike noticed them during a tire rotation, engines idling, cameras barely hidden behind tinted glass. Then came the questions shouted from sidewalks, the flashing bulbs as he locked up after hours, and strangers asking Anna and Jake if they liked living with a Monroe. He tried to keep his cool. He called the sheriff, put up signs, even threatened legal action. But the whispers kept growing, and every time he turned on his phone, there was another article, another angle, another headline twisting their lives into a story they hadn't asked to star in. Mechanic Mike, Monroe heiress, Heiress falls for blue-collar dad of two. Tragedy to fairy tale? Inside the small-town life of Isa Monroe. Isa came to the house less after that. Not because she wanted to, but because every time she did, it got worse. Cameras followed her down the street. Her name was suddenly on every morning show, every entertainment site. Her face splashed next to blurry photos of Mike's porch, his kids, even Jake's elementary school. One night she showed up late, hair hidden beneath a ball cap, sunglasses tugged low. Mike opened the door and found her standing there with a backpack slung over one shoulder, her expression tight, tired, desperate. "I've been staying an hour out of town," she said softly. "The press followed me to the cottage. Someone took a drone shot through the window." Mike didn't say anything at first. He just stepped aside to let her in, locking the door behind her like it might hold back the whole world. "I never wanted this for you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "For them." "They're scared," he said honestly. "Anna doesn't want to go to school. Jake asked if you were in trouble." "I am in trouble," she said, pacing. "But not in the way they think. I walked away from all of this because I couldn't breathe. Now I brought the whole storm to your door." She looked at him, eyes pleading. "Tell me how to fix it." Mike exhaled. "I don't think you can." And it broke her more than she expected, because for the first time in years, she had something real, and now she was watching it slip away. Mike stood at the kitchen sink, staring out the window like it might give him answers. The dishes sat untouched in soapy water, steam curling up into the silence. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the backyard where Anna's swing swayed in the wind. Empty. Isa sat at the table behind him, her hands clasped tightly, knuckles pale. She hadn't said a word since she arrived, not really. Just quiet apologies, soft explanations. But none of it made the headlines go away. None of it stopped Jake from crying when strangers yelled questions from across the school parking lot. Finally, Mike turned. "I can't keep doing this." Isa looked up. "Mike?" He held up a hand, voice steady but strained. "Everywhere I go now, there's a camera, people poking around the garage, reporters waiting at the gas station. My kids can't walk down the street without someone snapping a photo. I didn't mean for—" "I know you didn't." He ran a hand through his hair. "But it doesn't matter. Your world doesn't just visit, Isla. It invades." She stood slowly. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying—" His voice caught. "I can't be part of it. Not if it means Anna's scared to go to school. Not if Jake asks me every night if the people with the flashing lights are going to take you away." She flinched like he'd struck her. "I'm just a guy trying to raise 2 kids the best way I know how," he continued. "And for a minute, I thought maybe you could be part of that we could build something. Small, quiet, real." His voice dropped to a whisper. "But your life doesn't do quiet. And I can't ask my kids to carry the weight of your name." Isla stepped forward, her eyes glassy, words trembling. "So that's it?" Mike nodded, forcing down everything he didn't want to say. "I need to protect them, even if it means walking away from the best thing that's happened to me in a long time." Silence wrapped around them like fog, thick, inescapable. Then Isla picked up her coat, her hands shaking slightly. "I get it," she whispered. "I do." She paused at the door, looking back one last time. "I just never thought I'd be the storm." And then she was gone. The bench sat empty for 5 days. The leaves around it turned brittle and gold, gathering in silent piles beneath the trees. Squirrels darted past. Children's laughter echoed in the distance. But the space itself, the curve of wood smoothed by time and weather, felt abandoned, like it was waiting. Mike drove by once, maybe twice each day. He told himself he was just taking the long way to the store or the scenic route home from the garage. But each time he passed the park entrance, something in his chest tightened. He didn't stop. He couldn't. The bench had meant something. It had been theirs before there was even a them. A place where words came easy and silences didn't feel like distance. Now it was just a bench again, and that simple truth hurt more than he expected. At home, the house felt too quiet. Anna kept asking when Isla would come by again, and Mike didn't have the heart to explain it in a way an 8-year-old could understand. "She's busy," he said. "Her world's different." Anna looked at him like she knew more than she should. "You didn't tell her to go away, did you?" He hesitated. "No, not exactly." She said nothing after that, just went back to her drawing, a picture of their family, this time without Isla. Jake didn't ask questions, but he clung harder when Mike tucked him in, wanted more stories, slept curled up tight, like he was bracing for the world to change again. Across town, Isla stared at the envelope on her desk. Another letter from her father's lawyer. She hadn't opened it, didn't care what the latest offer or threat was. None of it mattered. The cottage felt colder now, bigger. She still played the piano sometimes, but only in short, hesitant chords. The music always stopped before it could finish. And the bench? She avoided the park entirely, because she knew if she sat there, she'd feel everything all over again. The warmth, the hope, the way Mike looked at her like she was worth more than her last name. The silence between them wasn't just absence. It was grief. The voicemail came on a quiet Sunday afternoon, just after lunch. Mike was folding laundry while Anna sat on the living room floor, coloring in the lines of a picture she'd started days ago, a lopsided cat in a pink tutu dancing on a cloud. Jake napped upstairs, his toy truck still clutched in one hand. Mike's phone buzzed on the counter, a voicemail notification, no caller ID. He hesitated before playing it, thumb hovering, instinct warning him it might not be just another missed call. He pressed play anyway. Hi, Anna, it's Isla." Mike froze, towel still in his hands. "I don't know if your dad will let you hear this, and I would understand if he didn't, but I miss you. I miss your drawings. You probably don't know this, but I kept every single one. They're on my fridge. The one of the princess and the monster truck? Still makes me smile every morning." Her voice cracked a little, soft and unsure. "I miss your questions, too. You're the only person I've ever met who asked me what my favorite kind of cloud is." Mike glanced at Anna. She was still coloring, oblivious, peaceful. "I don't know how to explain grown-up things," Isla continued, her voice smaller now. "Sometimes adults make decisions to protect people, but sometimes we protect people so much we lose them. And that's on me." A pause, a breath. "You made me feel like I belonged somewhere, like maybe I could just be a regular person who drinks chocolate milk and listens to stories about space unicorns. That meant more to me than you'll ever know." There was silence at the end. Then, "Tell your dad thank you for letting me be part of your world, even for a little while." The voicemail ended. Mike stood there a moment longer, heart caught somewhere between pain and something tender. Then he set the phone down, walked to the floor, and sat beside Anna. He watched her color for a beat, then said gently, "Hey, someone left you a message." Anna looked up, eyes curious. "Isla?" Mike nodded. Anna smiled. "I knew she missed us." It hit the front page of the biggest Sunday feature. The truth about Isa Monroe, heiress, runaway, and the legacy she refused to inherit. Mike found the article by accident. He was scrolling on his lunch break, trying to ignore the constant buzz of his phone, when her name leapt out at him in bold, gold lettering. At first he wanted to look away, but something in the photo, a candid shot of Isla, half-turned, eyes distant, pulled him in. The piece was long, glossy, and clearly written by someone who'd wanted the scoop for years. But unlike the tabloid garbage from before, this one was different. It wasn't gossip, it was truth. Raw, unsanitized, and impossibly human. It told the story of a girl born into a world where appearances were everything. How Isa Monroe was groomed to become the face of Monroe Holdings from the moment she could walk. It chronicled the pressure, the suffocating expectations, the cold boardroom whispers, and the headlines crafted like scripts from a life she never chose. The article spoke about her mother's quiet battle with cancer, how she kept it hidden, how her death was not just a tragedy, but a turning point. It revealed that Isla had tried to stay, tried to lead, but her voice was drowned out by legacy and lawyers, her grief buried beneath balance sheets. Then came the breaking point, a secret board vote to override her final say on a charity project in her mother's name. A betrayal, quiet and sharp. That night, Isla left the building and never went back. She vanished from the media, severed ties, sold her shares quietly, and disappeared without a public word, until now. Mike read every word, barely breathing. It felt like someone had peeled away the armor she wore and shown the world the person he had already seen. Not the heiress, not the headline, just Isla. At the end of the article, there was a single quote from her. "I didn't leave because I hated my family. I left because I was losing myself. I wanted to find out who I was when no one was watching." Mike sat back, eyes still on the screen. And for the first time in days, he didn't feel confused or betrayed. He just missed her, fiercely. Jake's birthday fell on a Saturday, sunny, crisp, and full of chaos. The yard was littered with balloons tied to folding chairs, a homemade banner drooping slightly across the fence that read "Jake is 6" in Anna's best handwriting. Mike manned the grill while neighborhood kids zipped past in superhero capes and paper crowns, fueled by juice boxes and frosting. Jake wore his favorite shirt, blue with little trucks, and a birthday hat that kept sliding over his eyes. He was beaming, sticky with cake, giggling as Anna chased him around the yard with a balloon sword. The presents came in waves. Toy dinosaurs, a remote control car, a plastic tool set Mike had secretly picked out weeks ago. Jake tore into each gift with the enthusiasm only 6-year-olds could manage. But one small box stood apart. No tag, no colorful wrapping, just brown paper, neatly folded, and a ribbon tied in quiet care. Mike spotted it before Jake did. It had been tucked under the table, almost hidden. He picked it up, turned it over. No label, no brand, just 3 tiny letters burned into the bottom in soft script. I am. His heart skipped. "Hey, bud," he called, kneeling beside Jake. "One more?" Jake tore off the paper, slower this time, like he could sense something different. Inside was a small wooden truck, carved by hand, simple, smooth, with real working wheels. No batteries, no flashing lights, just craftsmanship. Jake held it like treasure. "Whoa." Anna leaned in. "That's real wood." Mike smiled quietly. "Someone made it special for you." Jake flipped it over, eyes narrowing at the initials. "What's I.M.?" Mike paused. "A friend, someone who thinks you're pretty great." Jake beamed. "Can I sleep with it?" "Of course." Later, after the sun dipped low and the yard was quiet again, Mike sat on the porch with the box in his lap, tracing the edges of the toy Isla had made. There were no notes, no grand declarations, just this, one perfect gift from someone who remembered the small things. She hadn't forgotten, and that meant everything. It was just after noon when the silver sedan pulled into the lot at Bennett Auto. Sleek, out of place, and far too polished for a town where most vehicles had dents and history. Mike was under the hood of a rusty Impala, hands covered in grease, sweat clinging to his collar, when the car door opened and a man in a charcoal suit stepped out like he owned the asphalt he stood on. He didn't belong here, that much was obvious. Mike wiped his hands on a rag and stepped out from behind the car, eyebrows raised. "You lost?" he asked flatly. The man didn't smile. "Mr. Bennett?" Mike crossed his arms. "Who's asking?" The man approached with careful steps, pulling a business card from his jacket. "Henry Calhoun. I represent Monroe Holdings. I'm also legal counsel for Charles Monroe, and by extension, Isa Monroe." The name hit like a low thud in Mike's chest. He took the card without looking at it. "She send you?" In a manner of speaking, Calhoun adjusted his tie, like the dust in the air was offending him. "Miss Monroe is currently declining all contact with the press. She's taken steps to remain private, but she has asked me to deliver something personal." Mike stiffened. What kind of something? The lawyer reached into his briefcase and withdrew a thin envelope. No seal, no letterhead. "A trust fund agreement for your children." Mike blinked. "Excuse me?" Calhoun remained unreadable. "It's modest by Monroe standards. Educational support, health expenses, no publicity, no ties, entirely anonymous on record." Miss Monroe made it clear it was not to be framed as charity. She called it reparation. Mike stared at the envelope like it was made of fire. "She thinks she owes us?" "She believes," Calhoun said carefully, "that she disrupted something good, and that she can't undo it, but she can honor it." Mike didn't reach for the envelope. He didn't move at all. Calhoun glanced around, clearly uncomfortable. "There's no expectation, Mr. Bennett. Merely a gesture." With that, he placed the envelope on the workbench, turned, and walked back to the sedan. Mike watched him drive away, heart pounding in his chest. He didn't open the envelope, not yet. But it sat there all the same, quiet, heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. Anna waited until Jake was asleep and the house was quiet. She sat at the kitchen table with her pencil case and the good paper, the kind with tiny stars printed in the corners that she usually saved for birthdays and thank-you notes. Mike was out in the garage, finishing up a late job, so she wrote with her tongue poking slightly out in concentration, careful not to smudge the edges. She didn't ask for permission. Some things didn't need permission. She remembered the address. It was one of the ones her dad had mentioned once, the one written on that folded piece of paper he kept in his desk drawer, the paper from the wallet. Anna had seen it just enough times to remember the name of the town and the street with the funny name, Hollow Birch Lane. She didn't know if Isla still lived there, but she hoped. The letter was short, honest, just like Isla had always been with her. "Dear Isla, I miss you. Jake does too, even if he pretends not to. He still sleeps with the wooden truck every night. It has a little chip now, but we say it's a racing scar. Dad's been quiet. I think he misses you a lot, but doesn't know what to do about it. Grown-ups are weird like that. I saw your picture on the internet. You looked sad. You used to smile more here. You laughed at my art and told me I was the only person brave enough to draw a monster with a tiara. I'm still drawing. I made one for you. Please come back if you want, not because you have to, just if you miss us too. Love, Anna, the girl who draws clouds. She folded the letter carefully and added a drawing. Isla standing at the park bench, surrounded by stars and butterflies, her hair blowing in the wind. Then she sealed it with tape, wrote the address slowly in her neatest handwriting, and stuck on 2 stamps for luck. The next morning she dropped it into the mailbox on the way to school, and she didn't tell her dad, because some messages weren't meant to go through adults. Some were just for her. The cabin sat quiet in the woods, miles from the nearest town, tucked beneath towering pines and a sky so clear at night it felt like the stars could fall right into her hands. Isla had come there to disappear. No cell signal, no internet, just a fireplace and a creaky old floor that groaned every time she walked across it. She hadn't expected mail, but there it was, left in the tin box at the end of the gravel road by the caretaker, who came once a week to check on the place. A single envelope, small and plain, addressed by hand. Her breath caught when she saw the handwriting, the careful letters, the extra heart over the I in her name. She took it inside like it was made of glass. At the table, with the fireplace crackling behind her, she opened it slowly. The paper smelled faintly of crayon. Glitter clung to the edges of the drawing tucked inside. And then she read. Line by line, sentence by sentence, her chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. I miss you. Jake does, too. You looked sad on the internet. You used to smile more here. Isla pressed her hand to her mouth, her shoulders shaking. Not from grief, from the rawness, the truth in it. A child's truth, unfiltered and full of grace. She unfolded the drawing next, her at the park bench, surrounded by tiny stars and soft blue butterflies. The details were uncanny. The shape of her braid, the bend of her smile, the little heart floating above her head. She didn't cry often. She had learned long ago that tears didn't change anything in her world. But she cried now, big, quiet tears that rolled down her cheeks as she clutched the letter to her chest, because Anna remembered her, not as a headline, not as a Monroe, but as the woman who listened to her stories and laughed at her cloud theories and called her brave. It wasn't just a letter. It was an invitation to come back, to be seen, to be forgiven. And for the first time in weeks, Isla knew exactly where she needed to go. The bench looked smaller than she remembered. Maybe it was the way the shadows stretched longer now, or how the wind carried that crisp, late autumn chill that whispered of winter coming. Isla stood at the edge of the park, hands buried deep in her coat pockets, unsure if she had the right to sit, but she did. Slowly, carefully, she crossed the path and lowered herself onto the bench, the same one where it had all begun, the place where a lost wallet had turned into quiet conversation, laughter, something like healing. It felt different now, heavier. She glanced around. The park was mostly empty. A jogger passed with earbuds in. A kid tossed leaves into the air, shrieking with joy as they rained down, but no sign of Mike, no sign of the kids, just Isla and the silence. She hadn't told anyone she was back. No messages, no calls. After reading Anna's letter, she'd packed up the few things she'd kept at the cabin and left before the sun had even risen. Her hands had shaken the entire drive. She sat with her back straight, knees together, every inch of her resisting the urge to fidget. She didn't know what she was expecting. An apology? A second chance? Forgiveness? Maybe nothing at all. Maybe she just needed to be here one more time. The wind picked up, rustling the last stubborn leaves above her. Isla tightened her scarf and leaned back against the bench, eyes closing. The wood was cold, familiar. Minutes passed, maybe longer. She checked her watch, then didn't. Time didn't matter here. And just when doubt began to settle into her bones, when she started to wonder if maybe she should have stayed gone, she heard it. Footsteps. Slow, steady. She opened her eyes. Mike stood at the edge of the path, hands in his jacket pockets, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Not anger, not relief, just presence. They didn't speak right away. The bench was still only so wide. He sat beside her, and for a moment they just breathed the same air, shared the same silence. Back where it all began. Mike hadn't planned to go. He told himself that a dozen times that morning, while pouring coffee, while tying Jake's shoes, while driving Anna to school with her backpack full of books and quiet hope. He told himself that life had moved on, that he had responsibilities, a business, 2 kids who needed stability, not headlines. But her letter had changed something, the one Anna had written, the one he hadn't known about until she slipped and mentioned mailing art to Hollow Birch Lane. He'd pretended to be annoyed. He wasn't, because deep down he'd wanted to say something too, something real, something unfiltered. But he'd been too wrapped in fear and pride and the ache of trying to keep his world from falling apart. And still, he found himself walking, hands in his pockets, jacket zipped up against the wind, footsteps slow as he approached the park. The path curved the way it always had. The bench waited at the center like it always did. But today, it wasn't empty. She was there. Isla. Sitting with her hands tucked between her knees, head slightly bowed, like she didn't quite know how to take up space anymore. Mike stopped at the edge of the path. For a moment he just watched her, letting the sight of her settle in his chest like something he hadn't let himself miss, but had. He didn't feel angry anymore, not exactly. There was still hurt, and caution, and a deep bone-level ache that came from caring about someone you weren't sure you could hold on to. But there was also the undeniable truth. He hadn't stopped thinking about her, not once. And no matter how much he tried, he couldn't forget the way she'd laughed with his kids, the way she sat on the floor and colored like it mattered, the way she'd looked at him, not like a project, not like a headline, but like a man, like a father, like someone who deserved to be seen. So he walked over. She looked up when he approached, her eyes wide but tired. Hope flickering behind them, like a porch light left on too long. He didn't speak. He just sat beside her, not because everything was forgiven, but because not everything had to be lost. The bench felt different this time, less like a place to hide and more like a place to finally tell the truth. They sat in silence for a while, neither rushing it. The autumn air hung between them, cool and sharp, and the sounds of distant laughter from a nearby playground reminded them that life kept going, even when yours felt like it had cracked in half. Isla was the first to speak. "I didn't come here to fix anything," she said, voice quiet. "I know I can't, but I needed to be here, to see you, to say, I'm sorry." Mike didn't interrupt. He let the words settle. "I thought I was protecting you," she continued, "but I was protecting myself, from the guilt, from feeling like I ruin everything I touch." Mike turned to her, brows drawn. "You didn't ruin anything, Isla. The storm came. We just didn't have an umbrella big enough." She gave a soft, broken laugh. "Well, that's the most poetic way anyone's ever told me I'm a walking disaster." "I didn't say you were," he said. "I said we weren't ready." He looked down at his hands, grease still lingering around his nails. "I've spent so long trying to hold everything together, for Anna, for Jake, for myself. And when you showed up, it was like someone saw me for the first time in years." She turned toward him then, fully, eyes glassy. "You think you were the only one?" she said. "You and your kids. You made me feel human again. Not a name, not a headline, just a person." They sat in that truth for a moment. No masks, no rehearsed lines. "I read Anna's letter," she said. "She drew a picture of me on that bench. Said I used to smile more here." Mike smiled faintly. "She's observant. Gets that from her mom." "I want to come back," Isla said, breath catching. "Not to your life, not unless you want that, but to the people in it. The ones who made me believe there's more than money and legacy and noise." Mike looked at her for a long time, not as Isa Monroe, the heiress, but as Isla, the woman who had sat on his porch colored with his kids and broken his heart in the most honest way possible. "I don't know what this looks like," he said, "but I know who matters." She reached for his hand. This time, he let her take it. The morning started with pancakes, slightly burnt, lopsided, and made with too much enthusiasm and not quite enough measuring. Jake insisted on cracking the eggs himself, and half of one ended up on the floor. Anna declared herself the sprinkle supervisor and poured rainbow sprinkles into the batter with dramatic flair. Isla stood in the kitchen laughing as flour dusted her sleeves, a wooden spoon in one hand and a warm ache in her chest. She hadn't meant to stay the night before, but when Mike offered the couch and the kids squealed with excitement, something inside her said yes without asking for permission. It felt easy, natural. They ate around the kitchen table, elbows bumping, syrup dripping, Anna explaining in vivid detail how unicorns might evolve if they had to live in the ocean. Mike nodded along, pretending to take notes. Isla chimed in, suggesting seaweed mains. Jake approved. After breakfast, they bundled up in jackets and walked to the farmer's market in town. Isla held Jake's mittened hand as he pointed out pumpkins and shouted about apple cider donuts. Anna asked if Isla could help her pick out a candle for her room, something grown up but not stinky. Mike watched it all quietly, the soft smile never quite leaving his face. Isla felt it in small moments, the hand-holding, the effortless chatter, the way Jake leaned into her when he got tired halfway home, and she didn't even think before scooping him up. No cameras, no scripts, no expectations, just the simple rhythm of belonging. Back at the house, they built a pillow fort in the living room. Isla crawled inside beside Anna, who handed her a flashlight and declared her official story reader. She read aloud until Jake fell asleep, curled against her like he'd been doing it all his life. Later, when the kids were tucked in and the house was quiet, Isla stood in the hallway for a long moment, listening to the soft breaths of two sleeping children. Mike stepped beside her, his voice low. "They already love you, you know." She looked at him, eyes misted. "I've never had this, not even close." He reached for her hand again, fingers intertwining. "Now you do." And in that quiet house, Isla felt it, not as a visitor, not as an outsider, but as family. The night air was cool, the stars stretched wide across the sky like someone had dusted the heavens with sugar. Mike stood on the back porch, arms crossed, watching the quiet of the yard. Inside, the kids were asleep. The fort still stood in the living room, a monument to an ordinary day that had felt anything but. Isla stepped out behind him, pulling the old flannel blanket from the couch around her shoulders. He didn't turn, but he knew she was there. He could feel her, close but waiting, like she always did, letting him decide when to speak. "I used to think if I held everything together long enough, life would settle into place," Mike said finally. "Like if I just kept my head down, kept moving, things would work themselves out." Isla moved beside him, close enough to share the silence. "But it doesn't work like that," he continued. "Life just keeps throwing you curveballs, and you either catch them or you get hit." She glanced at him, eyes soft. "And what about this? What are we?" He let out a breath, long and steady. "This?" He turned to face her, eyes honest. "This is the first thing in a long time that feels like more than survival." She blinked, caught off guard by the clarity in his voice. "I was scared," he admitted, "of the noise, of what your name would bring into our lives, of losing what little piece I've built for the kids. But pushing you away didn't protect us. It just left all of us a little more empty. Isla's voice was barely a whisper. So what now? Mike stepped closer, hands gently finding hers. Now, I stopped keeping the door halfway open. No more what-ifs, no more conditions. I don't care about the headlines. I care about you, the woman who made my kids laugh, who stayed up coloring and read bedtime stories like she was born to belong here. Her eyes filled with tears she didn't bother to hide. I'm in, Isla. All in, if you still want this. She didn't answer with words. She just leaned in and kissed him. And it wasn't rushed, it wasn't desperate. It was the quiet, steady kind of kiss that said home. And this time, neither of them pulled away. The park looked just as it had that first day. Same winding paths, same peeling swing set, same wooden bench beneath the old oak tree. But for Mike and Isla, everything had changed. They sat side by side on the bench, shoulders touching, hands loosely intertwined. The late afternoon sun spilled golden across the grass, casting long shadows and warming the cool breeze. Anna and Jake raced in circles through the leaves, their laughter echoing like music through the stillness. Isla smiled as she watched them, her eyes soft. Jake's wearing his crown again. Mike chuckled. It's his king of the park look, very exclusive. Anna spun, arms stretched wide, then shouted across the field, We're making a leaf kingdom. You guys have to come see. In a minute, Mike called back, squeezing Isla's hand gently. Let the royal architects finish their designs. They both watched in silence for a moment longer. The kind of silence that wasn't heavy anymore, just full of understanding, of belonging, of peace. I still can't believe this all started with a wallet, Isla said, shaking her head. Technically, Mike said, it started with you leaving a wallet on a park bench and me being too honest for my own good. She smiled at him. You say that like it's a flaw. He shrugged. Sometimes it felt like one, until you. Her gaze dropped to their hands. You know, I never told you. When I first left everything behind, I didn't think I'd ever stop running. I thought that was all I was good at, vanishing. Mike looked at her, steady and sure. You didn't vanish, you just hadn't landed yet. A breeze passed through, stirring the leaves around their feet. The kids yelled something about dragons and leaf shields. Isla laughed. I guess I finally landed. Mike nodded. Right where you were always meant to. They sat there a while longer, watching their kids, build a kingdom from nothing but twigs and imagination. No photographers, no headlines, just love in its simplest form. The world still spun. But here on this bench, it finally made sense. They say life turns on big moments. Job offers, heartbreaks, doors slammed shut or flung wide open. But sometimes it pivots on something smaller, something quiet, something like a wallet left behind on a park bench. Mike never planned on picking it up. He hadn't been looking for change or destiny or the kind of story people tell around fire pits years later. He was just a tired dad on his lunch break, doing what he hoped someone else would do for him. An honest act, nothing more. But that wallet, it held more than money. It held a name, a question, a beginning. And through it came Isla. With her guarded heart and quiet sadness, her grace, her ghosts, and her need for something real. Not grand, not loud. Just real. Something soft enough to trust and strong enough to hold. Together, they built a life that didn't make headlines. It didn't need to. It was spaghetti dinners and sticky birthday fingers. It was laughter. In pillow forts and shared glances across crowded rooms, it was hard talks on park benches and hands held through silence. It was home. Looking back, Mike would never be able to explain how it all unfolded so perfectly messy. How a lost item could become found family. How a woman running from the weight of the world could find peace in a small town where nothing big ever happened, except this. And Isla, she would always remember the moment he called her name like it wasn't a brand, but a person. How he never asked for more than honesty. How he made her believe that love didn't need an empire to be worthy. So if you ever find a wallet on a bench, don't walk past it. Pick it up. It might not lead to anything. It might just be a wallet, full of receipts and loose change. But maybe, just maybe, it's a door, a whisper. The first page of a new chapter you didn't even know was waiting for you. Because sometimes the smallest act of kindness leads to everything you never knew you needed, and that changes everything.